Just as a quick heads up, throughout the video the microphone quality gets a bit funky, but I think I fixed it so that it stays the same range. Okay, back to the video. I am a huge fan of the Five Nights at Freddy series. I've been here since the start. I've watched all the big YouTubers play the games, I've watched all the lore videos, and I've engaged in the theories for years, but I have never played more than 5 minutes. When the first game came out, I downloaded the Spooky Bear game onto my tablet and was too scared to even get jump scared. The game was promptly closed and deleted, but the idea of it is what made me seek out others playing it and eventually led me deep into the FNAF community, and I've never looked back. In this video, I will take a quick look at the most convoluted stories in gaming history. Well, one of the most convoluted stories, I suppose. In this video, I'll be taking a quick look at the iconic Five Nights at Freddy's game series, its mysteries, and touching on the highly anticipated movie adaptation. Let's begin. Five Nights at Freddy's, a name that has echoed through the halls of internet history with the numerous Let's Plays, fan theories, fan art, animation, the list goes on. You'll be hard-pressed to find another game series with this level of influence and staying power that FNAF has had. FNAF is going on to its 9th year of relevancy, which in the gaming and internet landscape is pushing old age with how fast something new and better comes along and dethrones the current king. In case you don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's was first released onto a lesser-known website by the name Pizzeria, August 8, 2014, and then a week and a half later onto Steam on the 18th of that very same month. The extremely talented developer Scott Cawthon had been making games for years prior to the FNAF franchise. He mainly focused his game development on Christian adventure games such as Pilgrim's Progress and The Desolate Hope, just to name a few. In 2013, before Five Nights at Freddy's was even an idea in Scott's head, a game named Chipper and Sons Lumber Co. was developed and released to middling reviews. Reviewer James Stephanie Sterling stated in the review that this game was unintentionally terrifying and that the beaver protagonist resembled a scary animatronic animal. Scott later then took the criticisms that his models were scary and animatronic-like to eventually create the iconic Five Nights at Freddy's. FNAF was actually a last attempt by Scott to continue being a game developer, and if this game wasn't a hit, he stated he would have retired and pursued a more normalized career. However, as we all know now, Five Nights at Freddy's was the epitome of overnight success. This was Scott Cawthon's big break, with critics giving high reviews and praising the game for its unique gameplay, stellar soundtrack, haunting atmosphere, and the brilliant horror elements. But what really kept people coming back for more was the brilliant and intricate narrative web of lore. The story of murder, possession, vengeful spirits, and a tragic family. Let's begin. To kick things off with the game that started it all, the aptly named Five Nights at Freddy's is a point-and-click survival horror game where you take on the role as a nighttime security guard named Mike Schmidt. Your task? Survive 5 nights, technically 6 to 7, of relentless animatronic horror. This game laid the foundation for the series and introduced us to the core 4 of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica. During those 5 nights, you must stay held up in your claustrophobic office and monitor the building's security cameras to gauge the location of the animatronics and make sure they don't get into your office by closing your doors when they're nearby. Because if they get in, you will be greeted to a hallmark jump scare that the series is known for. The game has a limited power system that slowly ticks down every minute and loses more power depending on if you have your doors, lights, or cameras active. If you run out of power though,
looks like someone wasn't ready for Freddy to come to the party.
when the power to the building shuts off, all the cameras go down, your lights go out, and your doors, which require power to be closed, great security design there, which will leave you open to Freddy, who will stand outside your door and play the Toreador March before jump scaring you and ending your night. We are told by our mentor Phone Guy, who is voiced by Scott Cawthon, that the animatronics wander around at night because they were never given a proper night mode, and if the animatronics catch us, they will think we are exposed endoskeletons with our suits off and will forcibly stuff us into a suit, which are filled with crossbeams, wires, and animatronic devices, especially around the facial area, and that could cause a bit of discomfort and death. This comes in full force on night 4 when Phone Guy leaves us his final message, which he basically says it's been a bad night for him and that when we get the chance, check out the suits in the back room. The call ends with ragged moaning and a jump scare implying that the animatronics are breaking into his office and have stuffed him in a suit, effectively killing him. The biggest draw to the games for me is the hidden lore of the series that is told to us in small pieces that the fans have to put together themselves. As an example, if you get lucky, you can notice newspaper clippings in one of the hallways that tell of a story of a man wearing an animatronic suit who lured 5 children into the back rooms and killed them. The bodies were eventually stuffed into the core 4 of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica, and also a rare animatronic of a collapsed Golden Freddy suit with no endoskeleton. The restaurant that happened at was eventually shut down due to health regulations because the suits had a foul odor and were leaking blood and mucus. Another hidden bit of lore is while randomly flipping on or off our cameras, you will see "It's me" flash on your screen before seeing the aforementioned Golden Freddy appear in your office. And if you don't flip on and off your cameras, you will be jump scared by them and your game will crash. At the time of the first game's release, the creator Scott Cawthon had no intentions of making a long series story that we eventually got today, and because of that, many of the lore elements were pretty contained to this one game before they were retroactively given meaning and fleshed out in the sequels. Speaking of sequels, for the next game in the series, we move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. After the success of the first installment, the FNAF series released its anticipated sequel just 3 months after the first game on November 11th, 2014. Talk about a quick turnaround rate. In the sequel, Scott definitely went bigger and better with a roster update from the original 4 to 5 animatronics to an impressive 14, not including the weird paper pals or Endo 02. These animatronics include a new toy line of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, as well as the withered animatronics from the first game, but we'll get into those in a bit. Next we have the new faces of Mangle, who looks to have been a toy animatronic of Foxy before it is revealed to us that the children would disassemble them every day, and eventually the staff stopped fixing Mangle and turned them into a pick-apart and reassemble attraction. Next is the oh-so-loathed Balloon Boy, and a rare appearance of an off-color version named JJ. Balloon Boy, or BB for short, is still considered the most annoying character in the series to deal with, and people just seem to hate him outright. We are also introduced to one of the major players in the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, Marionette, or the Puppet. I said we would get back to the withered animatronics, and I'm going to add the Puppet to that list for now. And finally, we have the returning Golden Freddy in all of his limp glory. But this time, he isn't alone with phasing in and out of reality. We now have a Shadow Freddy that when brightened has a purple hue to him, possibly connecting him to certain purple guys in the series. But before that, last but not least, we have the aptly named RWQFSFASXC, or RWQ for short, but more commonly known as Shadow Bonnie. Shadow Bonnie is also seen in a 1 in a million chance for him to spawn, and also has a love of crashing your game, similar to Golden Freddy. The gameplay is similar to its predecessor, with animatronics moving throughout the pizzeria and trying to get into your office to kill you. However, you no longer have the safety of closing a door in the face of certain doom by the fact you no longer have any doors. On top of that, the animatronics also have 3 possible ways into your office, with 2 vents on each side of your office and a giant opening to the main hallway of the building. How are you to survive, I hear you asking? Simple. You were given a Freddy mask to fool the animatronic's facial recognition software into believing you are Freddy and not some squishy human or exposed endoskeleton out of its suit. However, the mask won't fool all the animatronics. Foxy will still see right through it and attack you unless you flash your flashlight down the hallway at him and disorient him, because apparently bright flashing lights cause some sort of system reset in the older models. However, on that note, the oh-so-loathed BB loves to sneak into your office and steal your flashlight batteries, then proceed to laugh in your face while Foxy makes a mad dash to your office to jump scare you. And finally, the Puppet. It's speculated that the Puppet serves as the prize vendor in this Freddy's location, but was at one point a security puppet, but that bit of lore is for a later game. In this game, you must use the cameras to look at the prize corner and keep a music box wound up, or the puppet would rise from its box and come to jump scare you even if you wear the mask, seemingly not fooled by it. This all culminates to not only raise the tension and suspense from the first game, but also change the formula up just enough to feel different while not deviating too far from the formula Scott seemingly perfected in the first game. Coming off the spooky lore that the first game seeded throughout its Easter eggs, this game took a more direct approach to storytelling, but if you know anything about FNAF lore, that isn't saying much, as even though we're giving much more lore to chew on, the meaning of it all was shrouded in mystery at the time. Thankfully, we now think we understand most of this game's overarching lore years later, with more context in games to weave a more comprehensive narrative of the series. Speaking of that lore, however, in this game we are given actual mini-games to play. If we are to get jump scared in our night, there is a random chance to get a death minigame. These minigames include Take Cake to Children, where you play as Fredbear taking cake to 6 kids during some sort of party where a 7th child looks to be locked outside the pizzeria while crying. While you are bringing cake to the happy kids inside, a purple car will approach the 7th child and a purple guy will exit his vehicle. We learn in future games that this man is called William Afton, so I will be calling him by his name from here on. Just keep in mind that we didn't learn his name until the book series revealed it in 2016 and wasn't officially in the game's canon until FNAF's sister location in October of 2016. William Afton then proceeds to kill the sad child, and then we are jump scared by the puppet, which promptly ends the minigame. The next death minigame is Foxy Go Go Go, in which we play as Foxy running out of Pirate's Cove while the message Go 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 is displayed. At the other end of the room, 5 children are hanging out and fireworks play. The minigame is repeated a second time, then a third. However, the third time, William Afton is shown standing and watching Foxy, and when Foxy runs to the children's room, the 5 children are all dead and the minigame ends with a withered Foxy jump scare. The third death minigame is Give Gifts, Give Life, in which you play as the puppet and are instructed to give gifts. You approach 4 dead children and give gifts to each of them. After the gifts are given, the text changes to Give Life, and you are to approach the 4 dead children again, but this time you give each child the original 4 animatronic masks, which implies they are being stuffed into the animatronic suits that was briefly mentioned in the previous game. While you are giving gifts and giving life, the letters Help Them are called out. Upon completing the minigame, a very brief flash of a 5th child in a similar room appears before the face of Golden Freddy appears and jump scares you out of the minigame. The final death minigame has you playing as Freddy, following the puppet through the FNAF 2 Pizzeria, where you find 5 bodies of dead children scattered around. While that is happening, letters are being called out similar to the previous minigame, but this time the letters spell Save Them. And once arriving to a certain room with the puppet, the game quickly cuts to static and ends. There are a couple of ways this minigame can end, such as touching any of the bodies or by encountering Golden Freddy while exploring the place. However, there is a rare variation that, while exploring, William Afton will appear and chase Freddy, and when coming into contact with him, flashing letters will appear saying, "You can't," and the game will shut off. Also, our good friend Phone Guy makes a reappearance to be our guide and lore dump at the start of each night. If you were paying attention, I said that he was killed in the previous game, and you would be right. This game is actually a prequel to FNAF 1, which at the time of its release was a hot topic of debate for a short while before everyone came to the same consensus that this was in fact a prequel. Also, shout out to MapHat for the iconic theory of Phone Guy being Purple Guy. Simpler times. Like the previous game, Phone Guy gives us a call each night to be our tutorial and exposition dump to the events leading up to the story, as well as connecting piece to FNAF 1. We learned from Phone Guy that a previous Freddy's location was left to rot for a long while, which makes the player believe he was talking about the FNAF 1 location, but as we come to find out at the end of the week, this location is being closed and eventually the old and broken, withered animatronics were fixed up and used in the FNAF 1 location, giving us a timeline for at least these animatronics as well as where to chronologically put the 2 games on a timeline. In the first night, Phone Guy also lets us know that the toy animatronics are all fitted with facial recognition and advanced mobility, while also letting them walk around during the day freely engaging with customers, as well as them being tied to some sort of criminal database so they can detect criminals and predators at just a glance. We also learned the previous guard at our position was moved to the day shift because of conditions. Again, we are fed the line that the reason animatronics are acting weird is because they were never given a proper night mode, and if they're in a room with no music or people, they think they're in the wrong room and go to look for the room that has people, which happens to be your room. Yay! This is when we're introduced to the aforementioned Freddy mask and music box to fool or calm certain animatronics. In the next calls, Phone Guy mentions the withered animatronics and talks about their smell. Yeah, we know all about that. He also mentions how to deal with Foxy, and that Foxy is Phone Guy's favorite, and that the puppet gives him major creeps, and that it is always thinking. Yeah, thanks man, that's definitely what I wanted to hear while being locked in here with these things. We are later told that the company tried to remake Foxy, and that's how the Mangle came to be, with the kids tearing it apart, and the staff basically just said, "It ain't my problem," and left Mangle as is, looking like a survivor from Sid from Toy Story. We are then told that there is some sort of investigation going on and the building is on lockdown and no one is allowed in or out, especially previous employees, and the place is temporarily closed. And the guard that we play as is going to be moved to the day shift, and another named Freddy's location is revealed as Fredbear's Family Diner, and that has been closed for years. And last but not least, on the 6th night, Phone Guy calls us in a confused panic, asking why we're at the job site, stating that the place is going to be closed down and someone used one of the suits in the back, a yellow one, and now none of the animatronics are acting right. Also, there is one last birthday party before the place is closed down for a while, and we're going to be moved to the day shift, and that we should stay close to the animatronics so that they don't hurt anyone. Phone Guy states he will be taking night shift for us in the foreseeable future, which directly leads us to the events of the first game. We learn in the first game an event called the
Was that the bite of 87?
in which someone was bitten by the animatronic and sustained an injury to their frontal lobe. The phone calls insinuate that the night guard in the 6th night who was moved to the day shift was in fact the person who was bitten and hurt. Around the time of FNAF 2 is when I would say the theorizing community really took hold and began to make their waves. As we've come to learn, many parts of the theories were right, but Scott had stated that we were all just a little bit off on the overall story. Yeah, 9 years later, and it's still arguable that we know even less about the overall story than we did all those years ago. With sea bonnies and mimics, and who could forget illusion discs and Phasgoo. I'm getting off topic here. Without knowing a better segue, let's move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was released on March 2nd, 2015, just 4 months after FNAF 2. I won't really touch on it, but some fans and reviewers were beginning to criticize Scott for rushing his games. Scott even released games before the publicly planned dates to the surprise of everyone. You can say a lot about Scott, but you can't say he didn't have a high work ethic. FNAF 3 was the biggest change to the formula for the series up to that point, with only really one animatronic and a new way to keep yourself safe and locked away in your office. FNAF 3 was, and I would say still is, the biggest hit or miss game in the series, with many fans saying it's outright the worst game in the series, while others giving it a pass for what it was trying to do and the major lore added to the series, which I will get to. FNAF 3 was originally touted to be the final game in the FNAF trilogy. Yeah, get used to hearing that. This is a running theme for the series. This game changed not only the formula for how to survive each night, but also the reasoning for being here in the first place. This game takes a 30-year jump from the events of the first game, where the Freddy Fazbear name has turned into more of a spooky myth or legend more than anything. In this game you play as a nighttime guard for a Freddy Fazbear horror attraction. We are also introduced to the oh-so-similar but very different Phone Dude. He's a radical dude who's totally into the whole Freddy and horror thing, man. But we'll get back to him. As I said earlier, this game did away with the larger roster of animatronics in favor for a singular one and a few phantoms that, when they jump scare you, they only mess with your electronics instead of killing you. But you will need all your electronics to deal with the horror that is Springtrap. As a side note, I know I'm not the only person to say this, but this game's Springtrap design is so good and it's sadly only downhill from here. Not in the quality of the art or anything, but just the overall design. This game's design is amazingly detailed, with you being able to see the decayed suit and literal decaying body inside of it, but we will get to that. In this game, you are back to one door and one vent, which sounds great. In theory, sorry. In theory, it should be easier, but Springtrap is surprisingly smart with how he'll enter your office. He has the option to run through the horror attraction to get to your office, or throughout the building there are various ventilation shafts that lead directly to your office. How are you supposed to survive this game's little brand of horrors? Well, in this game, Scott wanted to utilize the cameras a bit more than the previous games instead of just flipping them up and down to appease the certain animatronics. This time, you have to find Springtrap in the horror attraction, which may I say is really hard, or maybe I'm just blind, who really knows. When you find him, you need to move to another room and use the speakers to simulate a child being in the attraction, so Springtrap will stop his relentless dash to your office to find the source of the noise. Sounds easy, right? No. As I mentioned earlier, there are phantom versions of the animatronics, which have Phantom, Freddy, Chica, Foxy, BB, Puppet, and Mangle, who all will jump scare you and cause one of your electronics to malfunction. These include the camera systems, the audio devices, and the ventilation shafts, which are all needed to successfully gaslight Springtrap and keep him out of your office. The gameplay is arguably more simplified, with only having to deal with one threat that will end your run instead of the mountain of animatronics in the last game. The way Scott made this game to be more of a reaction-based game instead of a specific strategy, such as checking both vents, winding the music box for 3 seconds, and then immediately putting on your mask before repeating the cycle like the last game. It makes it feel like Springtrap is more alive and a harder challenge. That's not to say the community didn't find an optimal strategy almost immediately after the game came out though. Also, I haven't really touched on the visuals or sound design for the games yet, for the simple fact I'm not really sure what I can say that hasn't already been said before, but I feel as if I had to bring it up at least once, and this game is the best time in my opinion. The first game's sound and art design was masterfully done to sell the feeling of being in a haunted pizzeria with a haunting atmosphere to boot. If you've seen my previous video on Shadows of Doubt, you know that I have a huge soft spot for atmosphere, and the first game's atmosphere was so well done. I was too scared to even play it. The second game had a more cleaner feeling, which in my opinion hurt the spooky factor a little, especially looking at the pristine looking toy animatronics. But personally, the game's overall sound design did make up for the visuals. And finally, the original trilogy ending. FNAF 3 had a spooky feeling, but more on a artificial feel, maybe because we know it is a haunted house, and by this point the way the game's jump scares have been in your face for so long, the actual spookiness factor had begun to fade pretty quickly. Also, FNAF 3 is the only game to have this singular visual style of just green everywhere. Even Springtrap has this piss-stained greenish yellow color that makes him even harder to find on the cameras. Like the previous games in the series, this game has some pretty hidden lore elements, and our phone dude acts again as our lore dump each night. The first night there's no danger at all, and acts more of a setup for the following nights. We are told we are security guard for the Fazbear Frights horror attraction, and everything used as decorations in here are all drawings, games, or really anything the Fazbear company sold off from the old pizzerias, and other establishments if we're lucky, and most of it is likely knockoff bootleg stuff. But hey, it's cheap and no one really remembers the original merch anyway. We also learned that Fazbear Frights is looking into a lead into some authentic merch that might look spooky enough. We are then given a breakdown of all the electronic systems we're going to need to check on and keep the place operational. The second night, Phone Dude is pumped because they found some authentic vintage audio training tapes that will be played over the speakers while the customers are getting spooked. But the biggest addition is they found a real, authentic animatronic, and it has been placed in the horror attraction. Phone Dude tells us good luck, and this is the last time we ever hear from him. The next few nights while we are fending off Springtrap, we get to listen to Phone Guy from the previous games talk about these animatronics called Spring Suits. If the name hasn't given it away yet, this next part sure will. Springlock suits are one half suit and one half animatronic. The suits are animatronics that, when needed to do more than just deliver cake and walk around, an employee could use the aforementioned springlocks to lock the endoskeleton, wires, and sharp metal bits out of the way for the employee to get inside and wear as a regular suit. However, we come to learn that the springlocks are very touchy, and any kind of moisture or quick movements could cause the locks to come free, which will release all the very sharp metal bits back into place with you still stuck inside the suit. Safe to say, that wouldn't be a very great feeling. A funny but grim quote from Phone Guy is, "In the case of spring locks coming loose while you're wearing the suit, please try to maneuver away from the populated areas before bleeding out, as not to ruin the customer's experience." He also makes mentions of a safe room that the employees use, similar to a break room, and that the safe rooms are an extra room that do not appear on any map layout. These rooms are off limits to customers, invisible to animatronics, and completely out of view from cameras. Yeah, I'm sure that won't come up or be a safety concern at all. Oh, hey, a safety concern. We next learned of a new safety policy involving the suit. Don't use them. Apparently at a sister location there was a springlock suit failure, and the company is no longer going to be using springlock suits, and regular animatronics are going to be the norm from here on out. Next we are told that the company released a statement to not use the safe room as a break room and repeats that no customer is allowed to be in the safe rooms. Also, a spring Bonnie animatronic has been noticeably moved after everyone was told not to use the suits. And in the final tape, we learn that all the safe rooms are going to be sealed for budget restrictions, and everything left in the safe room will be lost. Those were all the calls and tapes, but we're not done yet for lore. Next we have the minigames similar to FNAF 2, except these are rewarded for beating each night. In the Night 1 minigame, we are taken to an Atari-style game where we play as Freddy Fazbear on stage, where we see Shadow Freddy and are told to follow him. We follow, and eventually we arrive to the top right of the map where Shadow Freddy continues into a room, but when we try to enter, we get an error message, and moving back down, we see William Afton run at us and begin to tear Freddy apart, ending the minigame. The following night, we play as Bonnie and play through the same minigame, with the only difference being Freddy is missing. The minigame ends with us being disassembled by good old Afton. The third night follows the same formula as the last two, except we play as Chica standing alone on stage. We follow Shadow Freddy and get disassembled by Afton in the end. Night 4 breaks the formula slightly as we start as Foxy standing outside of Pirate's Cove. The minigame has us follow Shadow Freddy and get dunked on by Purple Guy again. Finally, Night 5, we go into the same minigame again, except we play as a crying ghost child, reminiscent of the dead kids in the FNAF 2 minigames. We navigate the pizzeria again, however, this time Shadow Freddy is no longer there to guide us. Upon arriving to the room the minigame usually ends at, we find the disassembled parts of the animatronics we were once playing as before. When we finally enter that last room that we couldn't enter, inside you will see 4 other crying ghost children blocking the exit to Afton. Inside the room are some old arcade machines and a Springlock Bonnie suit that we were told about before. We chase Afton around the room before he decides to get into the Spring Bonnie suit, possibly trying to scare the kids. However, because of a combination of him quickly putting on the suit in a panic, the water dripping on the suit from the broken roof, or maybe him laughing and moving rapidly, the suit's springlocks all become undone and the metals, gears, and wirings lock back into the animatronic mode, causing Afton to spew blood from every hole in the suit and be crushed and impaled. He collapses into a pool of his own blood, seemingly on the verge of dying. The spirits realize the murderer has finally got what's coming to him and seemingly fade away to rest, giving us our bad ending, showing the animatronic heads with their eyes still glowing, signifying the spirits are all still trapped in the suits. If you want the good ending, however, you need to pull off an insanely hidden series of steps, such as each night during the minigames, finding a text block and clicking on it to start a new type of minigame, which I won't be going deep into. Just know the FNAF community is very willing to tear apart the games to look into every nook and cranny for hidden lore. Such as, during your night, if you look at a random piece on the wall, you can type in a code on the wall like a dial pad to access one of the required minigames to get this good ending. If you complete all the required minigames, after Night 5, you will unlock a similar screen to the bad ending, but this time all the animatronic heads have had their lights off, signifying the children's souls have been freed. Also, if you complete Night 6, which is significantly harder than the rest of the nights, you will unlock Nightmare Ending, which shows a newspaper that tells us that Fazbear Frights has burnt down. But if you brighten the image, you will be able to see Springtrap hidden in the dark portion behind Freddy, insinuating he survived the fire. Phew, okay, so that was a lot, but we can come to some pretty solid facts about the lore up to this point. Specifically, William Afton on one night killed a child outside of a Freddy's location, which somehow caused the child's soul to inhabit the puppet. Side note, I know this wasn't a fact till later games, but it's easier just to add it here for the sake of the story. Please don't crucify me. William Afton then wore the Golden Bonnie Springlock suit, lured 5 kids to the back of the pizzeria, and killed them. The puppet stuffed the kids into the original 4 suits of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, Chica, which, as the minigame implied, gave life to the suits and caused them to be haunted. Another side note, it's still debated on how many kids Afton actually killed, and if it's only the original 5, aka the MCI, Missing Children's Incident, plus the puppet, or if another set were killed during the events of FNAF 2, which caused the animatronics to freak out and the place to become closed. I don't know the answer to this, but there are some pretty great theories out there for each of the possibilities. Either way, Afton went back to the pizzeria after it was closed and disassembled the animatronics and was eventually cornered by the children's spirits inhabiting the suits. Afton, panicking from witnessing literal ghosts of kids he murdered, understandably tries to escape or do anything to protect himself and gets in the suit he used to kill the kids. This backfires and the suit ends up failing and he seemingly dies. Later, the Fazbear Company finds his body in the safe room and decides it's better to seal up all the safe rooms and just pretend like it never happened, while also retire all the suits for obvious reasons. Afton is left there in the safe room in agony until 30 or so years later when the horror attraction finds the safe room while looking for spooky shit to fill their attraction with and inadvertently releases the monster.
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one. Gotta go, man. Well look, it's in there somewhere. I'm sure you'll see it.
You might be asking, wait a minute, how is Afton attacking us if he died 30 years ago? Well, for one, I really don't want to get into Remnant and Agony and Soul Metal and all that right now, as it was not introduced in the series yet, so let's just say he haunted his own body or suit, okay? Okay. At this point, FNAF was becoming a pretty recognizable name, with 3 games under its belt and every YouTuber under the sun trying to get a piece of the Freddy pie. With many YouTubers getting their name out there with the series, it's safe to say FNAF was a rising star and not only a niche horror fandom, which leads us to Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the final chapter. Here we go again with the final game shit. This time I am confident that this was originally going to be the last game, but as you will soon find out, people were not too happy with that idea or how it ended. FNAF 4 was released July 23, 2015, again just a mere 4 months after the last game, and after hearing that many people didn't find FNAF 3 all that scary and the general idea of the series was getting a bit stale, Scott decided to ramp up the fear factor to an 11. Many people still swear this game is the scariest, just on the jump scares alone, not so much the atmosphere sadly. Though there are a few nightmares hidden around the corner for us to uncover. Just a quick disclaimer, FNAF 4 is a still semi-heated topic for debate as the story around it is highly open for interpretation. I will try to clarify when needed if something is more speculative instead of pure facts. Usually I would go into the gameplay and hidden lore before talking about the overall story or theories. However, this game, as I mentioned earlier, is still up for the air for interpretation, and depending on which theory you believe to be real, the game can completely change the motivation and explanation of the game. So, with that in mind, you either play as Michael Afton, which I will get into far later, or, more commonly, you play as a child who throughout the week leading up to his birthday is bullied and scared by his older brother, which all accumulates to the crying child's birthday. Side note, it has now been 8 years and we still do not have a definitive answer to what this kid's name is, which is wild considering this kid may be considered a main character in the series. The fandom likes to use the name Evan based off a book that released later on after the game, but this has never been confirmed. Because Crying Child is a mouthful and Evan is not technically canon, I'm just gonna call the kid Cece. During Cece's birthday, it is shown that his older brother and some of his friends decide to bully Cece again by picking up the terrified kid and making Freddy kiss him. However, Freddy gives Cece a bigger kiss than anyone was expecting. Freddy bites down the kid's head, shocking everyone and gravely injuring the child. After completing Night 6, we are shown Cece sitting in an empty void with his Golden Freddy plush, who asks if Cece can hear it and apologizes for what happened with Freddy. After that, the plush asks if the kid still believes that they are his friends, and stating that Plush Freddy still thinks that they are his friend. Golden Plush Freddy then tells Cece that he will put him back together. While the plush speaks, the other plushes begin to disappear before finally disappearing itself, leaving Cece alone in the void. After he is left alone, we hear a flatline beep heard from a heart rate monitor, implying that Cece has finally died due to his injuries. Finally, after completing Night 7, aka Nightmare, we are then taken to a gray box with locks on it, and no matter how much we click the box, it never opens. A message then states that perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now. The contents of the box have been theorized for years and still remains unopened. Scott Cawthon has stated that the contents of the box have changed a few times, but never outright stated what they were. Well, after that cheery ending to the seemingly end of the FNAF story, let's get over to the lore side of things. When FNAF 4 came out, the biggest theory was Dream Theory, which was proposed by MatPat, which, while unsatisfactory, makes a lot of sense, and I personally subscribed to that theory when it first came out, before Scott realized how upset the community was by that ending and eventually changed it. If you are unaware, Dream Theory proposed that the 3 previous games were all made up in the mind of Cece while he was in a coma. The theory is far too long to explain here, and now 8 years later has been retconned by Scott in the sequels, but at the time was a pretty good theory that may have been correct. Fans, however, were livid that all the time they had spent piecing together a story turned out to all just be a dream. It felt real unsatisfactory, and that's why later we got the sequel, sister location, and the books to try to explain away the intricate story. Now that the idea of dream theory has been somewhat explained, and that the future games expand upon the story, as of writing this script, a new book has been released recently which possibly explains the lore to this game with gases that alter your mind and it all being some sort of experiment. But as I have not read the book, and honestly I don't plan on it, I will just keep the lore to my own running theory. And again, this is just my headcanon, and I am not claiming this to be the canon. We either play as Cece while he is in his coma, having to fend off the very nightmares that ended his life until his injuries finally take him. Or we play as Cece's older brother, who we eventually come to find out is named Michael Afton. In this scenario, the nights are experienced by Michael Afton going through nightmares years after the events of his brother dying and after Michael has gone to Freddy's locations to work as a security guard, which possibly explains how he knows about certain animatronics as well as some Easter eggs about Phone Guy and such, but I will leave that out of this for now. I will expand on Michael Afton and his personal story when we get to the events of FNAF Sister Location. After all that, it's finally time to discuss the actual gameplay. I will keep this part short and simple. In this game, you are in a child's bedroom, surviving from midnight till 6 AM like all the other games. The main difference between this game's gameplay and the others is, you must listen at the doors for very faint breathing of the animatronics hiding outside of your door. If you hear breathing, you must close the door and listen for the animatronic to leave. If you miss the breathing or hold the door open for too long, you'll be hit with an extremely loud jump scare from Nightmare Bonnie or Nightmare Chica, as you most likely had your volume cranked to even hear the breathing. You also have to deal with Nightmare Foxy if he gets in your closet by closing said closet and flashing him a few times. And finally, the Freddles that are behind you on your bed that are mini versions of Nightmare Freddy that you have to periodically check on or be jump scared by said Nightmare Freddy. There is also another animatronic called Nightmare Fredbear, which is a nightmare variant of a golden Freddy spring-lock suit. On the 7th night, we were also introduced to Nightmare, which is almost identical to Nightmare Fredbear, with the only difference being the costume color is changed to a transparent black color and his bow tie and top hat have changed from purple to a yellow/gold color. As I said earlier, FNAF World was supposed to be the final game in the series, but as we all know, that wasn't the case, as just 6 months later, on January 21st, 2016, Scott dropped another game in the series, FNAF World. Because I don't really consider FNAF World to be a mainline series game, I will cover this one just a bit quicker than the others. FNAF World was the biggest departure of the series to date, and the first official spin-off that instead of trying to scare the audience, Scott went in a whole nother direction. FNAF World originally was released onto Steam, but after a rough launch and valid criticism of the game, Scott pulled the game from Steam and asked Valve to refund all players, and not only did he allow for players to receive refunds, but he encouraged them, even if they had enjoyed the game, because Scott released a free updated version to Game Jolt as an apology to everyone. With that in mind, let's look at the game itself. Scott took all the characters and side characters from the series and redesigned them to take on more of a cute and colorful twist. The game itself was Scott's take on an open-world role-playing game that takes you through a world inhabited by all the animatronic characters that we have come to fear and love in the main series. The gameplay has us assemble teams of animatronics with their very own unique abilities and attacks to then explore different areas, battle enemies, and complete quests. The game uses a turn-based combat system which requires players to use various strategies depending on the enemy we're going up against. The game features various themed areas similar to if you've played any Mario or Zelda games. As previously stated, the game shed its scare-filled identity for a lighthearted comedic tone, and while some fans were not too pleased, many others thought it was a great break for the series to not be the same copy-paste format. Now, this wouldn't be a Scott Cawthon game without deep, hidden, and complicated lore to it. This game's overall story and relevance to the overarching series canon is still up for debate, however there still seems to be a cohesive story here. Without going too deep into the hows and whys, the general consensus seems to be that the game takes place in the mind of Cece and the spirits are attempting to help Cece put him back together, as Plush Freddy had said in the previous game before Cece's death. There are 7 endings, but from my research it seems that only one is the true ending, with you being tasked to find and set clocks throughout the game, and after completing that task you are brought to a black screen with 2 white eyes that almost mimic the line in FNAF 4's 6th Night, albeit with a new line tacked on. Again, this game's story and connection to the overarching lore is debatable to say the least, and many either ignore it or just dismiss it outright. But I felt like I needed to touch on it just for the sake of this video. Many fans believe that the series had ended, as FNAF World was to be a small spin-off as a final thank you and goodbye to the fans. However, as previously stated, with its rough launch and lukewarm reception to put it lightly, it's no surprise that Scott couldn't let his series end on such a sour note. I haven't really touched on it yet, but Scott had a very hands-on approach when dealing with the community, and fans had a direct line of communication to Scott at this time. Scott would frequently use his website to update fans on new games and updates by changing the pictures on the website to drum up hype or, in this case, reveal lore. After some time, he announced the new game was to be released named Sister Location, but after a few weeks, the website stated the game was going to be cancelled due to leaks. Many fans took this at face value and were saddened by this turn of events. However, if you brighten the image on the site, we get to see an article about Circus Baby's Pizza World closing a day before its opening due to gas leaks. This was an obvious troll by Scott, who had gained a reputation over the years as he'd love to troll his fans whenever he could. This all culminated to October 7th, 2016 with the official release of Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location. This game was another huge shakeup for the series, which completely changed the regular sit and survive format the previous mainline games relied on. This game was also the first game in the series to have major voice acting for its characters. Because this game is such a large departure to the series, and acts more of an adventure game than the previous Sit and Survive, I will detail the first portion of this game in complete detail, and then begin to skim over some details, only bringing up something in detail if necessary to the overall story. The game opens with the conversation of a man detailing the newest animatronic, Circus Baby, and explaining all of her features to some executive board member.
Clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those.
She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
After the man finished detailing the design choices, the exec says, "Those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton." This was the first time William Afton was directly named in the series, and if you've been keeping track of the lore, we know this man is the serial killer responsible for killing at least 6 children. Before night 1 begins, we hear a little girl asking her father why he disallows her to play with Circus Baby.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her?
After the game begins proper, we find ourselves on an elevator descending down into an unknown facility. However, posters in the elevator show off the previously mentioned Circus Baby and some sort of ballerina.
Please enter your name as seen above the keypad.
We are greeted by a new face, Hand Unit. He introduces us to our new job and asks us for our name. Because of the shaky elevator, we are unable to properly put in our name, and Hand Unit autocorrects her name to...
Welcome, Eggs Benedict.
Cue the haha and hee-hees, as this was a big meme back when the game first came out. Interestingly, we notice the name Mike is written on some tape placed on Hand Unit. We are told by Hand Unit the location's backstory, explaining that Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was created to fill the void for when Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was closed down, and the purpose was to rent the animatronics out from this location to birthdays and events. The elevator arrives at the bottom and the doors open to reveal a small room with a vent covered by caution tape, which we travel through to enter the primary control module. Here's where we are given our first task, where we must check on Ballora Gallery. We use the console to light up the room but find it empty. Hand Unit tells us to give Ballora a controlled shock. After the shock, we light up the room and see the ballerina from the poster in the elevator dancing on the stage, effectively introducing us to Ballora at a safe distance. Next, we do the same for the Funtime Auditorium. After giving Funtime Foxy some hearty shocks, we are told to enter another vent at the other side of the room. This leads us to Circus Control, and once again we are tasked with lighting up the room and finding it empty. Then to give Circus Baby a controlled shock. However, the shock mysteriously doesn't seem to work, and we are never shown Circus Baby. After that, Hand Unit tells us our first shift is over, and we are free to go home.
Great job, Circus Baby. We knew we could count on you. That concludes your duties for your first night on the job. We don't want you to leave overwhelmed, otherwise you might not come back.
This brings us to the cutscene that occurs every night, which our character sits down and watches their soap opera, Immortal and the Restless, while munching down on some popcorn. As you can see, the gameplay is vastly different from the rest of the games, and the style continues for most of the nights to come. Now, I won't be going into extreme detail as I did the first night, but here's a breakdown of the rest of the nights. Night 2 repeats the elevator ride of Night 1, and the goal is to check on Baby once more. A power failure happens as we hear Baby talk for the first time. Baby introduces herself and says she does not recognize us, and after a bit of dialogue, she tells us to get on the desk and hold the sliders closed and to not make eye contact.
I remember this scenario, however. It's a strange thing to want to do, to come here. I'm curious what events would lead a person to want to spend their nights in a place like this. There is a space under the desk. Someone before you crafted it into a hiding place, and it worked for him. I recommend that you hurry, though. You will be safe there. Just try not to make eye contact.
Eyes begin to peer into our hiding space as Biddy Babs attempt to open the sliding door before Baby scares off our attackers. Afterwards, she tells us not to listen to Hand Unit as he will get us killed while we are in Bellora's gallery, and if we follow her instructions, she will ensure we make it through safely.
When your guide comes back online, he is going to tell you that he was unsuccessful, that you must restart the system manually. He will then tell you to crawl through Bellora Gallery as fast as you can to reach the breaker room. If you follow his instructions, you will die.
After the power returns, Hand Unit tells us to go through Bellora's gallery as fast as possible. Doing so results in us getting jump scared by Bellora and ending the game. However, if we listen to Baby, we are able to get through unscathed. Upon reaching the other side of Bellora's gallery, we enter the breaker room.
You may now interface with the breaker control box.
In here, we must gaslight Funtime Freddy with audio clips of his handheld friend, Bon Bon, while we reset all the power systems to the facility. Afterward, we must return to the main control hub, back through Bellora's gallery, and this will end our night and we get to go home to watch our favorite vampire soap opera. Night 3 has an interesting bit of hidden lore. If we disobey Hand Unit and go to Baby's control room, she will tell us a story. I will save all the important lore parts for the lore section of this game, but keep in mind we are given a huge lore bomb that will make a lot of sense later. This night, we are tasked to go through the Funtime gallery and evade Funtime Foxy by flashing a beacon sparingly. After reaching the end of the room, we enter Parts and Service where we are once again face to face with Funtime Freddy. We must retrieve a power module from Freddy by following Hand Unit's precise instructions to open his chest cavity. However, the final part of this minigame is to remove another module from Freddy's hand puppet, Bon Bon. The hard part is finding Bon Bon in this dark room and pressing their bow tie before they escape and hide behind Freddy. After completing that semi-annoying minigame, we are tasked to go back through Funtime Foxy's room. However, we do not make it and instead are jump scared by Foxy, which ends our night. Which, interestingly enough, is the first time we are canonically jump scared in the series. This directly moves us into Night 4, which we find ourselves in a springlock suit, with Baby telling us she has kidnapped us and has hidden us in the suit. We watch as Bellora gets scooped. We are also ominously told that Baby is the only animatronic who knows how to pretend. This night we need to keep all the spring locks wound up while also keeping Bellora's Minirinas out of the suit or we'll get jump scared and fail the night. This minigame was actually so hard at launch that Scott had to go in and make it easier for people to actually complete it. Funny enough though, the king of FNAF,
But as you all know, I am the king of Five Nights at Freddy!
Markiplier, along with a few others, had actually beaten this minigame pre-patch, which is pretty impressive. After a long and frustrating minigame, we get to go home to watch another episode of The Immortal and the Restless. Night 5, we are once again treated to another big meme from the game, Exotic Butters, which is our reward for completing our first hellish
We have
week.
gift baskets containing fruit, nuts, flowers, and of course the ever-popular cash basket. I see what you were trying to type, and I will autocorrect it for you. Thank you for selecting Exotic Butters. Exotic Butters.
This night though, as we enter the primary control room, we are told the technicians who work there have not gone home. We once again check the Bellora Gallery and the Funtime Auditorium. This time though, we are shown the bodies of both technicians who have been unalive. We are tasked to once again make our way through the Funtime Auditorium and enter Parts and Service. However, this time we get the pleasure of finally meeting Baby face to face as we must prep Baby to go to the scooper room. Baby, however, cuts off Hand Unit and tells us that she is pretending, and that the cameras are still watching.
Can you hear me? I'm pretending. Remember how I said I could pretend? The cameras are watching.
She tells us some cryptic information about bad things happening, that there's something bad inside of her. We must open up Baby and retrieve what is good. We are also told that Bellora is in the room with us and to be careful. After going through the instructions Baby gives us and sending her to the scooping room, we must go through Funtime Auditorium while listening to Baby's instructions to dodge Bellora.
Go forward. You are almost there.
Warning, you've entered a highly dangerous area. You have entered from Maintenance Hatch 1B, reserved for cleaning and repair of the scooper. Entering this side of the room is strictly prohibited by unauthorized personnel.
If we follow her instructions, we are led to the scooping room. Baby tells us that Funtime Foxy, Funtime Freddy, Bellora, and Circus
You are in
Baby
the
have all been in the
scooping room
scooper
now.
already.
Funtime Foxy has already been here today. Funtime Freddy has already been here today. Bellora has already been here today. Circus Baby has already been here today.
This leads us to realize that we have been tricked. We can see through the glass of what looks to be an amalgamation of all the animatronics wires, which is named Ennard. They tell us that they wish to escape the facility, but they can't due to how they look, but if they looked like us, then they could escape. Afterwards, the player is hit with the scooper and killed. A cutscene is shown of our character looking at themselves in the mirror with their eyes opening to show purple and insinuating that Ennard is now inside the player character. Well, if that isn't just a terrible mental image, I don't know what is. This is the game's canon ending. Similar to FNAF 3, there are two endings. The non-canon ending requires us to do the opposite of what Baby tells us in the Funtime Auditorium, which eventually leads us to the private room, where we have to face off against Ennard as they try to get into her office.
It seems that you have accidentally wandered into a restricted area. Due to the sensitive nature of the materials that you may be exposed to here, you will not be allowed to leave until the cleanup crew arrives at 6 a.m. So hang tight. Rest assured that you will be promptly rescued, fired, then sent home.
This part is in the same gameplay style as the rest of the FNAF games, with us surviving till 6 a.m. on a limited power supply. If we survive the night, we go home to watch a final Immortal in the Restless episode, which is capped off with Ennard crawling its way into your home and bringing us to the credits. As I mentioned earlier, at the start of the nights, we hear a little girl talking to her father asking why she can't play with Circus Baby.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? Daddy, you let the other children go see her. Why won't you let me go? Daddy, just once let me go play with her. She's so pretty and shiny. Didn't you make her just for me? Daddy, she can make balloons. Have you seen her make balloons? Oh, Daddy, let me go to her. Daddy isn't watching. Don't tell Daddy that I'm here. I wanted to watch your show too. I don't know why he won't let me come see you. You're wonderful. Where did the other children go?
We eventually learn that this girl is named Elizabeth Afton, and over the course of the 5 nights, we find out how in love with Circus Baby she is, and her father won't allow her to play with Baby. This eventually culminates into Elizabeth defying her father and meeting Baby. After some time, Elizabeth realizes she'd been left alone with Baby and questions where everyone else has went. We are left on a cliffhanger, but if we remember back to when Baby told us a story on night 3, we learned that Baby was only on stage for one night. Circus Baby loved the music, the cake, the balloons, and entertaining the children. She would always count the children, but not know why. When she was counting the children, she was eventually left alone with only one, and something inside of her changed. She was no longer herself. She opened her stomach hatch and produced an ice cream for the single child, and, after the child stepped closer, there was screaming, then silence. Baby didn't seem to understand what happened, but we do. Throughout the nights, if we get jump scared, we have a chance to get a death minigame, like the ones in FNAF 2. The minigame has us playing as Baby, delivering cupcakes to kids along a level. If you're able to give cupcakes to all the children and return to the start, you will see a little girl with orange hair and green eyes. We come to learn that this is Elizabeth. Baby slowly approaches Elizabeth and produces the ice cream, and as Elizabeth goes to take it, a robotic claw reaches out and pulls her into Baby's stomach hatch, with Elizabeth screaming and eventually dying due to injuries. A cool detail for eagle-eyed fans though is during the minigame we see Baby with blue eyes, but in all the promotional trailers and game art we see her with emerald green eyes, the same eyes Elizabeth had. This is to show that during the events of the game, Elizabeth has in fact possessed Circus Baby. Before I talk about the final bit of lore for this game, I wanted to talk about the custom night. Every mainline FNAF game so far has had a custom night, which allows players to set the level of each animatronic, ranging from 0 off all the way to very hard at 20. This game has a custom night as well that sees you facing off against Funtime Freddy, Bonbon, Funtime Foxy, Ballora, Yendo, Lolbit, and a variety of Minirinas and Biddy Babs. The custom night's animatronics have their own strategies to deal with them and stop them from jump scaring you and ending your night. There are also presets that the game has that let you fight off a select few animatronics at various levels. However, if you complete a preset at very hard, we unlock a secret cutscene. The cutscene shows us a man walking down the street with unknown people waving at the man cheerfully. The second cutscene shows the man walking down the same street with a slight change in his skin color. The third has the man looking more green, and one passerby seems to notice the man looking somewhat off. The fourth scene shows us the man's skin is a greenish-brown color, and more people begin to notice the changes in the man's complexion. The fifth scene, the man looks more decrepit, and all the people look confused, now noticing his complexion changing. The sixth scene, the man's skin has turned a dull purple with less people around than before. Finally, in the last scene, the man's skin has a dark purple color to it, and he is hunched over while walking. The people who were once waving are now hiding from the man as well. When the man reaches a sewer entrance, the man spasms, pukes up tangled wires and eyes that shoot out into the sewer, the tangled wires and animatronic parts being Ennard. They descend into the sewer and the man collapses dead. We then hear Baby's voice repeating, "You won't die," and the man seems to reanimate and come back to life. We are given one last cutscene if we complete Custom Night's Golden Freddy preset on very hard mode that I will play now.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
This tells us that in this game we play as Michael Afton, the son of William Afton and brother to Elizabeth and Cece. Wow, this family has some serious issues. As you can tell, this was a huge lore bomb when this game first came out. As you can tell, Scott wanted to fix the ending of FNAF 4 as well as make a game that the fans could enjoy. The problem, however, is that many things about the series' story had to be rewritten so FNAF 4's story could work and not be retconned. Of course, not everything could cleanly fit together to work in this game's new narrative, but I have to give Scott props for even trying to attempt that. Also, one confusion that is 100% Scott's fault is that we already had a purple guy in the series who killed kids. Then in this game we are shown a guy's skin becoming literal purple and it is not the same person. Okay, Scott, thanks for the confusion. We learn that this purple guy, aka Michael, is looking for his father, as we see in the final cutscene is Springtrap from FNAF 3 sitting in the ruins of Fazbear Frights. In recent years, the overall opinion of this game has gone down because of the lack of replayability as well as the actual night-to-night gameplay being a bit more boring. I understand the criticism, but when this game first released, the excitement around this game was high and the amount of lore this game had to fix to make the new FNAF story work was impressive. With all that said and done, we move on to the third time the series supposedly ended. During the time between games, Scott had released his second novel and talked more about the FNAF movie having problems. Many fans believed that we would never even get this movie, and honestly, who could blame them? The movie had been talked about for years, getting picked up and dropped by various directors and studios, as well as the actual script being rewritten and scrapped as supposedly 9 times. In other bad news for fans, in July of 2017, Scott announced the cancellation of the 6th mainline FNAF game in the series just after 1 month of him saying the 6th game was in production. However, he did tease fans with a much smaller FNAF Pizzeria Tycoon spin-off game in the future. A full 14 months after FNAF Sister Location released, on December 4, 2017, Scott released Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, which looked to be the spin-off game he previously had teased. Opening the game, it looked to be a small 8-bit style game where you were able to design a pizza and have Golden Freddy shoot pizzas at customers. After a little bit, another Freddy appears, becoming an obstacle and blocking pizzas from getting to customers. The game proceeds until it begins to glitch out, and the real game that Scott had been making for the past year is finally revealed. Clearly this was Scott trolling the community once again, and the mainline game that was cancelled was actually still in development. There are compilations out there of YouTubers playing the minigame and believing this was nothing more than a spin-off game until the real game is revealed, and their reactions are priceless. This game somewhat returns back to the core of FNAF, with the office section having you sit and survive. However, this game has 3 distinct gameplay parts. The first being the salvaging minigame, which you must do after the real game begins. Here you sit across the table from one of 4 new and old animatronics and play a cassette tape. The tape plays spooky sounds, and after each test, you mark down whether the animatronic had any reaction to the sounds. The goal here is to make it through all the tape's parts without being jump scared. If you feel threatened or see movement, you can shock the animatronics to pacify it, but if you shock them too much, their scrap value will decrease and net you less money. But more on that later. If you fail to stop the animatronics, you will be jump scared and hear an audio clip unique to each of them. Whether you are successful or not, you will progress into the main gameplay phase, the Tycoon Simulator. In this section, you are tasked to run your very own, profitable, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. This entails you purchasing cheap and discounted items to fill your pizzeria to make a profit. Many of the attractions and discounted animatronics have a risk level which can cause lawsuits for your business. If you get sued and have no money, that is a fast way to get a game over, which, funny enough, is one of the 7 endings achievable in this game. During the day, you will earn money from customers, which you then use to upgrade and improve your pizzeria. Starting with basically an empty room, you eventually turn this place into a bustling hub of children's entertainment, fun for all ages, even if some of the entertainment is in fact nightmare fuel. And finally, the third part is the traditional gameplay of you being in your office fending off whatever terrible nightmares you've let in during the scrappy minigame, or if you bought something evil off of the catalog. This section has you completing tasks on your office computer. Things such as replacing items, printing flyers and posters, to even unclogging toilets. From your office, somehow. While doing your task, you must keep an eye on your noise level and the heat in the room. Too much noise will attract the aforementioned horrors into your office. The hard part is that the temperature in the office will raise fast to an unbelievable level and eventually leading you to passing out, which promptly ends your night. You must use the office's very noisy ventilation sparingly to cool the room down while also not letting the animatronics hear you. This mode is somewhat different than previous games in the fact that you are directly in control on how fast your night progresses. There is no 6 a.m. waiting for you this time. Here, you're only allowed to leave when all the computer tasks have been finished. Then, once you've completed everything, you finish up your shift and you are returned to the salvaging minigame. Rinse and repeat each night. This game, we are introduced to some new and old faces. We meet Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, Scrap Trap, and Lefty during our salvaging minigames, and we are able to purchase a new lineup of the original 4 who all go by the Rockstars. For example, Rockstar Freddy or Rockstar Chica. We are also introduced to a new animatronic such as Orville Elephant, El Chip, Funtime Chica, and Music Man, along with a new off-brand lineup of Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, Ned Bear, and Pig Patch. We also meet some side characters such as Trash and Gang, Lemonade Clown, Fruit Punch Clown, and the absolute nightmare that are Egg Baby and Prize King, and finally, Candy Cadet, who we will get back to later. We are also introduced to a new Freddy variant that will become another mascot in the in-universe company for Fazbear Entertainment, named Helpy. Helpy is a small white and pink bear similar to Funtime Freddy, but without the bonbon hand puppet and the lack of desire to unalive you. Helpy shows up in the catalog screen when purchasing items, during the lawsuit screen where he is shown doing all your paperwork, and shown to be testing various minigames, which, side note, have some hilarious animations. There is one other character we meet in this game. When we first arrive in the salvaging minigame, we hear a man's voice on the cassette tape.
Begin tape. Leaving dead space. 3, 2, 1.
We eventually learn that this man's name is Henry, so for the sake of ease, I'll just be calling him that from here on. Henry goes through what is expected of us in this job and congratulates us for meeting the criteria of our special obligations. These include checking the back alley every day to see if there are any scrap animatronics outside. If so, we must bring them in and proceed with the salvaging minigame. Henry goes over the tutorial on how to do this minigame, and the last time we hear from Henry is on the final night, but we will get back to that. Like the previous games before this, there are hidden minigames sprinkled throughout which reveal lore to the players. We will start with the security puppet. When you interact with the security puppet, we control the puppet and are tasked with preventing a child with a green security bracelet from reaching the exit. However, we never see the correct child, and interacting with any other child ends the minigame. On the 4th time we play this game, the child with the green bracelet is seen locked outside, seemingly done by the other children from the minigame. The puppet is locked inside of their box by what looks to be some heavy gift box. After some struggling, the puppet escapes, but not before the child it was supposed to protect disappears from the window. The puppet leaves the building to chase the child and keep her safe. Upon leaving the building, we see there is a rainstorm happening and the puppet begins to rapidly break from the exposure. This eventually leads the puppet to have to crawl after the child before we see the child laying in the alleyway dead. The puppet uses the last of its strength to wrap itself around the child as a final way to protect her. With that, the first secret minigame ends. I will discuss the exact lore relevance after going through the other minigames first. Next, we have the most confusing minigame in this entire franchise, with the actual lore meaning behind it still largely unsolved, and it is also a hotly debated topic. It is none other than the infamous Midnight Motorist. In this game, you drive down a road at high speeds and dodging cars. Interestingly though, on the 4th lap, there will be a break in the bottom of the road, and if you drive down into it, you are brought to the real minigame. Upon leaving the course, the game changes drastically. The minimalistic graphics change to have a bit more detail, as well as no longer being a racer minigame. We see our purple car in a rainstorm on some back roads surrounded by woods. After driving around, we eventually make it to some establishment named JR's, most likely Junior's. We exit our vehicle and see our character, a orange silhouette, who walks to the door of the building and is stopped by a green person who tells us that we know we are not allowed to be there and not to make things difficult and we should just leave. After the confrontation, we get into our vehicle and back on the main rainy trail. There is, however, a secret area that we can leave our vehicle and walk into the woods to find a clearing with what looks to be a dirt mound. We can't interact with anything, so we get back into our vehicle and we head to our house. Upon arriving home, we see an individual sitting on a chair watching TV who tells us to leave him alone tonight, and then goes back to watching TV. We go up the hallway and arrive at a closed door. Our character knocks on the door and gets angry, stating he told you not to close the door. After a bit, our character will get angry and pound on the door and demand for it to be opened. Our character decides to go outside and look into the room from the window. Going around the house, we see the window has been broken and a pair of shoe prints lead away from the broken window and into the forest. Interestingly, we also see what looks to be animatronic feet marks standing just in front of the tree line with no footmarks arriving or leaving, and said animatronic is gone. Our character states that he ran off to that place again, he will be sorry when he gets back. The minigame then promptly ends. Yeah, I'm really not looking forward to discussing that one in the lore part. Lastly, we have Fruity Maze. In this game, we play as a small girl in a pink dress, running in a maze full of different fruits. We are tasked with collecting all the fruits in the maze in a limited time. Throughout the collecting of fruit, after a certain threshold is achieved, we see the words "time extended" appear and our time limit is increased. More interestingly, we see a face of a young girl with blonde curly hair, pink dress, and blue eyes, reminiscent of the minigame's character spray. The second time you play the minigame, the game will change a bit and the music will sound a bit more broken and distorted. Also, some of the fruits change to a sprite of a dog, and this time the girl's face is looking sad with tears in her eyes. The third time we play, the music has continued to be more broken than before, as well as all the fruits changing to look like the previous dog, but in a pool of blood. This time though, when the girl's face appears, we see William Afton behind her in his signature spring Bonnie suit. Upon losing, the minigame fades to the girl and Afton with the text saying, "He's not really dead, he is over here, and follow me," which finally ends the minigame. Before we get to the endings, I just wanted to quickly go back to Candy Cadet, who I had previously mentioned. Candy Cadet is an animatronic you can buy and will light up and make noises and sing you a little jingle. However, if you are lucky, you will be told one of the 3 hidden stories. Without going into detail, Candy Cadet tells us 3 stories that all involve the destruction of 5 things, or 5 things being melted down into just one. I'll talk about it later, but it is usually used as key evidence to support a widespread theory about the original missing kids incident, but as I said earlier, we will get back to that. The next part I want to talk about is the alternative endings to the game. The first and easiest ending, in my opinion, is the bankruptcy ending, which triggers if you lose all of our money from lawsuits. We then get a quick cartoon that tells us we put all of our eggs in one basket and the gamble failed. This gives us the bankruptcy certificate and restarts our game.
You gave it your best shot. You went all in. You put all your eggs into one basket and did the unthinkable. You ran out of cash. While we encourage entrepreneurs to follow their dreams, we also recognize a lost cause when we see one. There are no do-overs, and we trust that you know your way out. But before you go, take this certificate of bankruptcy. Now do everyone a favor and get lost.
Next up is the bad ending, which we get by throwing out at least one animatronic that we are tasked with salvaging. At the end of the week, Henry congratulates us, but then states that we did not meet the special obligations under paragraph 4 and our employment is terminated. Interestingly, we do not get a certificate for this ending. Next is the blacklisted ending, which requires us to have a risk rating of 50 or more on the last day, by purchasing items with a high liability risk from the catalog and placing them in our pizzeria.
Congratulations! By some miracle, you've completed a full week on the job. Here at Fazbear Entertainment, we encourage a healthy spirit of entrepreneurship, which sometimes means taking risks, but you took it a step further. You were reckless and borderline criminally negligent in almost every decision that you made, so much so that you've been deemed a liability hazard, even for us. We'll mail you your final paycheck, minus the costs of wiping the security footage clean and erasing all trace of your employment from our files. But don't feel like you're leaving empty-handed. Take this blacklist certificate. You'll be lucky to ever find employment in this town again. Now take care.
Next is the mediocre ending, which has us not invest in our pizzeria and our Faz rating score is 0. We get Faz rating for placing items in the pizzeria and playtesting the games. We are then shown another cartoon where we are told we are so lazy that it should be an accomplishment in its own right, and then given the mediocrity ending. Damn, I feel called out there.
Congratulations! You've completed a full week on the job, and you've done it in such a lackluster way that no one is proud or disappointed. It's a fine line to walk, but you did it, completing your job with such an efficient level of laziness that we're surprised you're able to dress yourself in the morning. While such a minimalist work ethic is rare, it doesn't mean that we want you back. In fact, it means you should look for employment elsewhere. But before you go, take this certificate of mediocrity. You should be proud. You stood on 2 feet and convinced someone that you could do something, when in fact you couldn't. Now get out.
The next I want to talk about is the Lore Keeper ending, which requires you to play and see all the secret minigames I spoke about earlier. In this ending, we are shown a gravesite for 6 children, which read Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, Jeremy, and the other 2 are either hidden behind foliage or too far away on the hill from the others to be able to make out. The last ending I want to talk about before the true ending is the insanity ending. In this ending, you are required to purchase Egg Baby and place it in the pizzeria, then go to your office and turn your monitor off while holding the button for a few seconds. This reveals us a set of secret blueprints that we can look at while Henry talks to us.
It's only now that I understand the depth of the depravity of this creature, this monster that I unwillingly helped to create, as if what he had already done wasn't enough. He found a new way to desecrate, to humiliate, to destroy. As if the suffering wasn't enough, the loss of innocence, the loss of everything to so many people. Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose, and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. It keeps me awake at night. I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this. He set some kind of trap. I don't know what it was, but he led them there again. He overpowered them again, and he robbed them of the only thing that they had again. I don't know how those tiny breaths of life came to inhabit those machines, but they will never find rest now, not like this. I have to call them all back, all of them, together in one place.
Congratulations! You went somewhere you weren't supposed to go, saw something you weren't supposed to see, and prevented a tidy resolution to a messy problem. Needless to say, you're fired. But before you go, take this certificate of insanity. We're giving it to you to ensure that no one believes you, and to ensure that we can promptly replace you without incident. There is a truck waiting for you outside. Take care.
To sum up what Henry tells us, he states that he is ashamed and horrified of everything that he unwillingly helped to create and that he has immeasurable guilt. Henry ends this speech stating that the souls of the animatronics will never be at rest and he needs them all to be in one place in order to destroy them all. While Henry speaks, we see blueprints for the scooper from FNAF's sister location, which details its ability to extract Remnant. Remember when I mentioned Remnant earlier? Well, this is when it was introduced. The second blueprint is a device called the RASC, or Remote Activated Simulated C, with the C possibly meaning child. I believe this is what was used to lure the animatronics around the pizzeria and the office sections while you were working on your PC. And the final blueprint is the animatronic Lefty, which stands for Lure, Encapsulate, Fuse, Transport, and Extract. Lefty was used to find the puppet and kidnap it and deliver it to our pizzeria. Now, before I get to the real ending, which is honestly in my top 3 endings in video games of all time, I just wanted to quickly say I don't think the ending would hit as hard as it does currently if not for the amazing voice performance of Dave Steele, who absolutely knocked this performance out of the park. But before I speak too much about it, let's get to what is required. If you've been following Henry's orders throughout the week and salvaging all the animatronics you find in the alley, as well as not doing any of the other endings, on the final night after you finish your last task and log off the PC, we will hear Scrap Baby begin a dialogue which will lead us to the final cutscene, which I will play now. Please enjoy.
You played right into our hands. Did you really think that this job just fell out of the sky for you? No. This was a gift for us. You gathered them all together in one place, just like he asked you to. All of those little souls in one place, just for us. A gift. Now we can do what we were created to do and be complete. I will make you proud, Daddy. Watch, listen, and be full.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called. You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
Congratulations on completing your work week. We apologize if your situation wasn't presented to you in a completely honest fashion when you first started, but it was important that your intentions and actions be genuine. Here at Fazbear Entertainment, we value fun, family, and food. But more importantly, we value our commitment to atoning for past mistakes and tying up loose ends. Thank you for your participation. There is no need for you to return to work next week, as Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity. Please accept this certificate of completion. Goodbye for now, and thank you for taking this journey with us.
Wow, what an ending. I mean, really though, that final cutscene took the last 3 years of games, lore, and characters and tied it all in a neat bow that the series could finally end on. I mean, it didn't really end here, as we came to learn, but many fans who have gotten tired of the series continually expanding after every other game being touted as the final game, uses this game's ending as their personal headcanon, and as you will come to learn, this game may have truly been the end, maybe? We'll find out. But before we move on, I feel as if we need to talk about this game's lore and what all of that just meant. I'm not really sure how I can weave this game into the narrative that I've been trying to tell you throughout this video without going into extreme detail about every little piece of lore. So I figured I'd just tell you the story as best as I know it from all the games while showing you parts that I'm referring to. Like the lore part in FNAF 4, I'm going to give another warning here that I'm telling the lore as I know it or as my personal headcanon. If you believe differently or think I am completely wrong or messing up the order of events, that is okay. I just ask you to be mindful of others' opinions and not rake me over the coals. With all that said and done, here is my quick story of the FNAF lore. There were two men who were creative geniuses who co-owned the Freddy's IP. These men were William Afton and Henry Emily. Afton was a husband and father to 3 children, Michael, Cece, and Elizabeth, and Henry was a single father to a young girl named Charlotte Emily, or Charlie for short. Over the years, the two partners developed a type of animatronic that was 1 part automated robot and 1 part suit. With the help of spring locks, people were able to enter the animatronics unharmed and act as either Spring Bonnie or Spring Freddy, to do more animated actions other than just moving or delivering cake. Years went by and the Freddy's business became to boom with the creation of merchandise as well as their own TV spin-offs. However, all good things must come to an end. On the day of Afton's son's birthday, Cece was accidentally critically injured by Michael bullying his brother and going too far. Cece is then in a coma for a while before becoming weaker and weaker and eventually succumbing to his wounds and passing. Rocking the family, this puts a strain on Afton's marriage and his relationship with his children, eventually leading to Afton's wife leaving him and his bitter feelings toward Michael for this tragedy. One night, maybe after having too much to drink at Junior's and thinking for far too long, Afton snaps and drunkenly drives off to one of the Freddy's locations, and whatever he was there to do is quickly forgotten as he sees his business partner's daughter locked out of the building and alone. Maybe revenge was on Afton's mind as the animatronic that killed his son was one of Henry's making, or maybe Afton just wanted others to feel the pain and loss that he has felt. With that, Afton attacks Charlie and murders her in the alley before driving off back home and finding his son Michael's door locked. Afton being angry and drunk, he goes to confront his son but finds him long gone to a place that he frequents. The next few years are a bit of a mystery, but we come to learn that Charlie's spirit latches onto the puppet and possesses it. After some time, William Afton goes on to wear a Springlock Bonnie suit and lures children into a back room at a Freddy's location and murders them, leaving them there as he escapes. The puppet, while being possessed by Charlie, stuffs the children's bodies into the animatronics for unknown reasons, possibly knowing that this is the only way to give life back to the innocent souls. The animatronics become possessed by the children, and this becomes known as the Missing Children's Incident. Relations between William Afton and Henry Emily seem to have deteriorated, and in response, Afton had created his own business named Afton Robotics. We are not sure how or why he learned of Remnant's existence, possibly seeing the animatronics behave strangely and learning the existence of spirits in possession. One night while the pizzeria was closed, Afton returned and dismantled the animatronics to steal the parts for his own line of animatronics. Afton then takes the old parts and melts them down to create this line of Funtime animatronics. Afton created this new line of animatronics with the sole purpose to kidnap, kill, and extract Remnant from children's souls for his own use. Because Afton melted down the animatronics, the souls of the murdered children were all melded together to create this abomination of multiple spliced souls being spread through the Funtime animatronics. Afton then creates a new animatronic named Circus Baby and opens a new pizzeria named Circus Baby's Pizza World. This location was only opened during its grand opening, and tragedy seems to love to strike the Afton family. When Afton was busy dealing with the pizzeria, his daughter, who had loved Circus Baby and wanted nothing more than to play with her, disobeyed her father and snuck away to play. After meeting Circus Baby, Elizabeth was left alone, and Baby's programming of capturing and killing kids kicked in and quickly abducted and murdered Afton's daughter. Afton learning of what happened, he had to create a cover-up story as to why he shut down Circus Baby's Pizza World, which led to the cancellation due to leaks and eventual shutdown of the operation. Afton, now losing 2 children to creations of his own making, went fully off the deep end. There seems to be another time shift here, but we know Afton turned his bunker into a new operation where he would send out the Funtimes to be rented to parties and do what they were originally made to do, aka kidnap, kill, and collect Remnant. Eventually, he had tasked his oldest son Michael to go down to the bunker and find the Funtimes, which leads to the events of sister location of Michael finding his sister in Baby and eventually being scooped and finally puppeted by the Funtimes and his body rotted. Michael seems to have survived being scooped due to the scooper having the ability to interact with Remnant and possibly allowing Michael to possess his own body after death, effectively creating a sentient zombie. While Michael is reuniting with the family, William goes back to the pizzeria for unknown reasons and is attacked by the remaining elements of what was the missing children's souls. Afton attempts to scare off the spirits by climbing into the suit he used while killing the kids, but call it karma or just bad luck, the spring locks fail and slice, stab, and split Afton, who is locked inside the suit. Afton begins to bleed out and the children's souls leave him to die. The next day, Afton is found by Henry, who knows the terrible deeds Afton committed and decides to seal the safe room with Afton inside to finally be free of the monster that was once his business partner and friend. Fast forward 30 years later, a horror attraction based on the myths and rumors of Freddy's franchise is opened, and in their attempts to collect old memorabilia, they accidentally uncover the body of William Afton still inside the Springlock suit. Unknowingly to them, though, they mistake Afton to be an old Springlock suit and haul it back to the horror attraction, releasing Afton once again. William Afton seems to have survived the Springlock failure in the same vein as his son and possibly possessed the suit that was once his demise, be it Remnant or Agony. Afton was back. It is believed that Michael took on the security guard position at previous Freddy's locations to find his father after everything William did to him. However, because Mike was a, literal walking corpse, holding down any job was not easy, as Mike could not have had a pleasant odor. During the events of Fazbear Frights, Mike took the job as a security guard, hoping to find any evidence of his father, who had been missing for over 30 years. This seemed to be a dead end, but as fate would have it, Mike would be reunited with his father. They recognized each other, even though both had been long dead. Mike needed to figure out a way to finally finish his father off and use the horror attraction's faulty wiring to burn the place down and try to kill him once and for all. But as we all come to know, Afton always comes back. Cut forward an unknown amount of time, Henry in his old age hears about another failed business tied to the Freddy's IP. He decides that he needs to stop being complacent and finally end this tragedy he found himself a part of. Henry creates one last Freddy's location with the goal to attract all the haunted animatronics as well as his old business partner back before finally putting everything to rest. The events of Pizzeria Simulator take place, and to the surprise of Henry, Michael Afton takes the job. The week goes by with all of the animatronics taking the bait and coming to the pizzeria to be trapped. Henry had created one last animatronic to capture the puppet which held the soul of his little girl, as Henry knew she wouldn't return here. At the week's end, before Elizabeth could finally kill Mike, Henry seals the building and sets the place ablaze, giving his final speech and encouraging all the animatronics to give up their souls and move on to whatever comes next, as well as giving his final goodbye to his ex-partner and friend, before wishing the fullest extent of hell upon him. Henry, Michael, Elizabeth, even William, along with all the small souls that were in the building, are finally released, ending the horror that started all those years ago. Wow, that was a lot. Okay, now, I already hear some of you asking, how is Afton attacked by the spirits if the spirits' souls should have already been melted down to create the fun times? Or, why is there a mound of dirt in the forest of Midnight Motorist? Shouldn't Elizabeth be buried here, which would mean she died before Charlie? And my honest answer is, yeah, those are all valid criticisms that would completely shake up this already very shaky timeline. My answer to that, though, is that this series is so convoluted and has so many plot holes that there just isn't a completely cohesive timeline that every detail about the series works with. The point of me putting this timeline together is less about me filling every hole of the series, and more so a rough understanding of the overarching lore of the series, using all the big points of evidence from the games to even understand what is happening in a timeline for this nightmare of a series. Wow, that was a lot. I'm so glad this was the amazing end to the series, and there are no more games that completely undo everything, and... wait, what? Oh, come on. Well, at least the next game in the series is less of a continuation and more of an epilogue, right? Well, let's get to it, I suppose. FNAF UCN, or Ultimate Custom Night, was to be the swan song for the series, releasing June 27, 2018. This was the big one. This last game would bring every animatronic from all the games throughout the series into one big sit-and-survive horror finale. Usually I would go through and name all the new and old animatronics, as well as any interesting point about them. However, that's a bit of a tall order. Yeah, there are way too many to go through, and this video is already ballooning far past my initial expectations. To keep this short, we are given a roster of 50 animatronics. Every main antagonist we had to go up against in the previous games are here, as well as some lesser seen animatronics, and even some wild cards like Fungi, Shadow Bonnie, and Old Man Consequences. This game plays similar to the previous game's custom nights, allowing the player to choose which animatronics they want to go up against, as well as adjust their difficulties. Similar to Sister Location, there are preset groups that we can choose, such as Bear's Attack, which sets you off against all the Freddy variants. There's also Ladies Night that, as the name suggests, has you facing off against all the lady animatronics at varying levels. The main goal of the game is to progressively increase the amount of animatronics and their levels to score points. The higher your max points from a single run, the more things you're able to purchase. You are able to buy 3 other offices that all revolve around the previous game's offices that have all been handcrafted to perfectly meld each office's feel. That was far too many offices in one sentence. Completing certain milestones unlocks you 2 different intermissions that all involve 13 total cutscenes. Without going play by play for every cutscene, we are shown the first series named Bear Vengeance, which is an anime style show that revolves around Freddy as our protagonist while he narrates the futility of his battles against Foxy. The second series is named Toy Chica The High School Years, which is another anime-style show revolving around the titular Chica living her life in high school and crushing on the various boys in her class, who are all modeled off different animatronics of the series, with every new crush going missing and some identifying part of them ending up in her bag, things such as Freddy's top hat or Foxy's hook, insinuating she has killed them. These 2 shows are usually used to draw parallels to some parts of the lore that don't really contribute to the overarching story, but are more so little pieces that give possible clarification and insight to certain events. The final cutscene happens when reaching a total score of 9,800. This plays an animation of Golden Freddy sitting in the void and violently twitching, insinuating that the spirit inside Golden Freddy is still around. That leads us to the lore part of this game. Even though this was to be the swan song for the series, Scott couldn't help himself and added not only lore to this series to help wrap some things up, but also added some other lore elements that were more questions than answers. The general consensus is that the whole experience of UCN is William Afton in this purgatory and being held here by the vengeful spirit, who the community loves to hotly debate over, but for this video I will say the vengeful spirit is a girl by the name of Cassidy who resides inside of Golden Freddy, or at the very least one of the 2 inside. The final cutscene of Golden Freddy shows us that Cassidy is the only victim of Afton left who has not passed on and is actively torturing Afton over and over by the very monsters he had created. Somewhat similar to the death minigames of the series, when you get jump scared by an animatronic in this game, there is a chance you will hear a voice line.
Let's taste death again and again and again.
Usually these voice lines somewhat relate to the character, such as Baby asking if you want to see the scooper, or Foxy giving us a very pirate-themed response. However, if you are lucky and get killed by certain animatronics, you will hear things such as, I have been reborn, not by you, but the one you should not have killed. Other animatronics have somewhat similar lines talking about the one you should not have killed. Also, in certain lines, we hear another voice who mimics what the animatronic is saying, giving us hints that the animatronics are being puppeted by this one you should not have killed. One last thing before we move on is there is a returning face from FNAF World who is named Old Man Consequences, who looks to be some sort of anthropomorphic alligator who is always fishing. If you set all other animatronics to 0 and him to 1, when his minigame pops up to catch a fish, you will be brought into a new secret minigame. The space is reminiscent to a super secret area from FNAF World. The area is of a small lake with Old Man Consequences fishing as usual. Sitting and speaking to him, he will say, "Leave the demon to his demons, rest your own soul, there is nothing else." The only way to leave this place is to force ourselves into the lake and drown ourselves, which causes the game to crash. Interestingly, in the background for this section, if we speed up the audio, we hear a man screaming in agony the name Mike over and over. This backs up the theory that we are playing as William Afton and he is still reaching out to his son to save him. So after all that, it seems William Afton has finally been stopped and punished, and all the spirits besides Afton's tormentor have finally been put to rest. This was the end of this arc of FNAF, and the games did continue onward, but I just wanted to highlight the Afton era of FNAF. Maybe I'll take a dive into the new arc at some point, but as it is still ongoing, and after each new game, the story we thought we understood is completely uprooted and new theories come to light. Before I end the video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the movie and the community side of things. After years of finally waiting, the FNAF movie finally released decent reviews. Fans reviewed the movie much more favorably than the critics, as the movie was a labor of love for the fans more than anything. The movie has various YouTuber appearances such as Corey Kenshin and, good old Matt Pat, as well as some smaller cameos of different YouTubers. It was a box office smash, raking in over $290 million worldwide, and with talks about a trilogy coming, this won't be the last time we see Freddy on the big screen. I saw the movie with some friends, and the whole movie we were whispering about references we saw, and that made the movie 10 times better for me. Another thing I wanted to quickly touch on is the insane amount of Five Nights at Freddy's content online. As I stated earlier, FNAF was an overnight success on YouTube, with massive YouTubers covering it like Markiplier, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, Dawko, the list goes on. We also can't talk about FNAF without mentioning Game Theory and MatPat, who has been a pillar in the FNAF community for years, with their countless theories stretching for almost a decade now. I also can't bring up MatPat without saying a huge thank you for myself and the FNAF community, as I hope with his retirement coming in a few months, he's finally able to relax and enjoy his family and raise his kid. He made a huge impact on countless people's lives, and I have to say my most sincere thank you. You will be missed, MatPat. The last thing I want to mention is the insane amount of fan content for FNAF. I'm talking fan art, fan songs, fan theories, fan games. FNAF has inspired a generation of people to create amazing things. However, if you go too deep like myself, you somehow end up listening to Jay Schlatt AA covers of FNAF music, and find this absolute banger of a song. Jay Schlatt sings The Afton Family, which I thought was a good song to mention here after all the Afton family talk we just had. With all that said and done, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting through this whole video. This video took far too long and taught me way too many things about realistic deadlines and showed me how to give myself a much proper workload that won't completely burn me out for months at a time. If you enjoyed the video or even learned anything about the FNAF series, please leave a like or subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff everyone tells you to do. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully a lot sooner than this video. Peace.